Okay, everybody, welcome back. This is the final day of what I must say has been a really successful first SJJMAS 2024. It started as a joke. It's ending on a high. I think everybody agrees it's been some good fun. Somehow people turned up. I just made it and people turned up, so thanks everybody who's done that. We're on the final day and we've got some special guests on the way out. This is number 34, and I've got Brandon Martinez with us. Thanks for coming, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Cool.
How you enjoying the Christmas holidays?
Yeah, it's been good. It's been quiet. I had some time off work, so I managed to fit this in around it. It's okay. The weather's mild. Everything's okay. How about you?
Yeah, I'm in Spain, so the weather's actually not bad. There's no snow in Spain, really.
Yeah.
It's usually about
None.
15 degrees Celsius.
Yeah. Well, here in the UK, it's very mild. So it's like 10 degrees here, which is kind of unusual. So
Yeah, you guys usually jump over to Benidorm, no? The Brits, they go hang out in
the Brits
Spain.
will go to Benidorm. Yeah, that's a thing,
Yeah,
obviously.
I've seen them. We've seen them.
get
Boozy
get those
Brits,
immigrants out.
right? The real troublemakers. It's the boozy
Yeah.
Brits.
Boozy Brits. Yeah, can't condone it. That's all. Oh my god. So right, let's jump into it. I want to ask you straight off. From my understanding, you were a Trump supporter. Obviously, Kamala was a crazy lefty bitch, so that's a no-brainer to me. You
Yeah.
also favourable to Elon Musk,
Well,
or
and
what?
insofar as he was supporting Trump, I think it was a good thing. It was interesting, certainly, to see Musk jump into the Trump camp because he had previously been a little bit of a lefty Democrat, right? Or pretty much neutral. He didn't really take a stand on much of anything, and then he just radically threw his weight behind Donald Trump. I thought that was quite significant. So it was good to help Trump get elected for sure. But I
Hmm.
guess some people are taking the piss out of Elon over this H-1B scandal.
Yeah, it's quite the scandal right now. What are your thoughts on it then? I mean, Elon is basically going to war over this. I think his current pinned tweet is that one. I'm not sure, but it's definitely a scandal at the minute.
Yeah, there's multiple takes on it. I mean, I guess there's different opinions within the Trump camp about whether that is H-1B visas are good. That Vivek guy came out when he came out with some spiel where he was saying, Americans are lazy, and that's why we
Mm.
need these people. And then people were jumping on that, and I don't agree with that Vivek take. But Musk himself, I think the reason that he's a bit more pro legal immigration is probably because I think he actually married a half Indian woman and had children with her. So that might be clouding his judgment a bit. And also,
Mm.
he mentioned that he came into the country on a visa. I don't know if it was that specific visa, but it was a working type visa, and so that's probably why he's got a soft spot for legal immigration. But that was really always Trump's stand, was he's against illegal immigration. He wants to do mass deportations, but he's okay with legal immigration. That's probably his weakest point in my
Mm.
view. And so it's good to see some pushback on that. I think, yeah, we shouldn't just blindly follow these guys. If they're going off the rails, there should be some pressure applied, and we have actually seen that. I don't know if you've been looking at Twitter, but we've seen like
Yeah.
Loomer and these people came out and they were going
Mm.
at going at Elon, and then he did a little ban spree of some of these groypers who were trolling him.
Yes. So, I mean, the rhetoric has been amped up on both sides. So, like, here's Elon saying America rose to greatness over the past 150 years because it was a meritocracy more than anywhere else on earth. I will fight to my last drop of blood to ensure that it remains the land of freedom of opportunity. But what's more interesting is that this was in response to somebody saying only 6% of new jobs added to the S&P 100, I think that's 500, were US white males. So people have taken this as Elon, like taking a big steaming dump on white Americans, but it's
Yeah, there's
hard to.
one comment he made where he says like he responded to somebody saying like we're just dumb or something like that. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I think he's just emotional right now. I think he's getting dog piled, so he's being a bit emotional. I think he'll cool down and he's actually said that he wants to reform the H-1B thing. So has Vivek. I think the better thing would be to just get rid of it entirely, which I think is Stephen Miller's position. Because like if you go back in 2016, Trump was against those visas entirely, and as is Stephen Miller. So the good thing is that Elon Musk is not the guy running immigration. It's going to be Miller and Homan and those kind of guys that are pretty hardcore on it, right? They're more hardcore than Elon, I think. Although maybe Elon's got some play with Trump right now.
Yeah, I definitely think he's got some play. I mean, my take, to be honest, I call myself a Musk maximalist. This was something I did like 2.5 years ago, and now everybody's coming to me and saying, "Oh my God, are you going to disavow him?" And I'm like, let's wait and see. He's obviously not perfect. He's been incredibly influential. He's just my take is that he's probably bought. Him and his tech bros really probably, are instrumental in Trump winning, for good or for bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think Musk was the biggest factor, and he weaponized the entire X platform to help Trump get elected. He spent, I think, a couple billion to fund Trump. So Trump kind of owes him a favor, but I hope Trump doesn't become just a little puppet on a string for Musk. He's got to take his own stands on things, and he agrees with Musk on like some things, right? Like I guess they're both against red tape and regulation and stuff like that. There's much to agree on there, but Musk seems to be a bit emotionally attached to the legal immigration thing. So we'll see how it plays out, though. I mean, it's very early, right?
Yeah, I looked at the numbers, and so I asked Grok what was the number of legal and illegal immigrants into the US in a year, and apparently in 2022 there was 2.6 million legal immigrants and estimated to be 1.5 illegal immigrants. So that's a total of 4.1 million. So I'm not in favor of opening the door to India. I don't want everybody to understand I'm not supporting Elon Musk on this cause, but I understand when he looks at it. He's like a 90s liberal. You're right what you said. He probably came on one of these visas, and so he realizes that somebody like him can be good for the country. And he's like, if we're going to do something about immigration, let's do something about that 4 million immigrants to the left of my 85,000 skilled immigrants that I want to bring in to like do AI and SpaceX and shit.
Right. I didn't. There was a chart someone put out saying like it's just a small sliver of the actual immigrants coming in, and it is, to be fair.
Yeah, it's about 80,000.
Temporary. Yeah, it's a temporary work visa. So, but it does open the door for those people to come in and then perhaps work around it and get in. So it's not something that's good. But I would just tilt the thing for European immigrants and just block India entirely. I mean, I don't know if you see my Twitter. I've been posting a lot of the Jeep memes. You've seen the Jeep memes. Yeah, nobody wants Indian immigration. Obviously, it's not a country that
they might not be YouTube friendly, so I might not be able to show that.
Yeah, I actually played some clips from India on my stream the other day, and it's just incredible what a dung heap that place is. It's a really is a shithole. Really is a literal
Yeah.
shithole.
For
They
YouTube, we
worship.
can't say all X are like X, so we can't like say all Indians are stinky. That would be wrong.
Right.
For instance, I think that's what I
Not,
actually
not,
think
yeah.
that is what Dalton Clodfelter and got the Groypers like kicked. Adrian Dittman went crazy over Dalton Clodfelter saying this about Indian people in a space. Did you see that?
Yeah, I didn't see the exact thing, but there must be some Indians working for X. There is, because they're getting ticked off at all the memes, and they seem to be personally invested in this squabble. So I'm thinking
Yes.
there's some Indians over at X that are seething about the memes. But it's just, I mean, they bring on themselves. You've seen the videos of them crapping all over the place and stuffing their face in crap. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's not a
Yeah.
culture we want to invite into the West, that's for sure. So, but I mean, the Elon thing, like, yeah, he's a bit weak on this issue, but thankfully he's not the one that's going to be running the immigration, and the base is pushing back on it, which is a good thing. I gave
Yeah.
Loomer props for doing that. She's pretty
She's lost
hardcore
her
on
check mark,
immigration.
hasn't she? She's lost her check mark over it.
It said there that it's because she changed her profile picture, so maybe she's embellishing that.
Oh, right.
But yeah,
Okay.
some people got banned for sure, and that was the Groip people that got cleaned out. You don't want to take Musk off, man. He is like a
Yeah.
tech dictator, right? He's like, he
He,
wants to be
he
the
paid 44 billion for this thing. Okay. He's
yeah.
like, fuck you.
It really is his own personal little fiefdom. He
Yeah.
he runs it as his own personal, like, promotional platform for his businesses, for Trump. Pretty incredible how he's able to pull off that takeover, because it used to be totally libtarded out, right? It was just like a Democrat dung heap, and now it's just total Trump, just total right wing zone.
Oh, it is. Yeah. It's crazy how he basically replatformed the right wing. But, I mean, people are never satisfied. So there's certain types that he basically didn't put back on, or put back on reluctantly. Famously, of course, Nick Fuentes. He put back on reluctantly. I think he said it at the end, and let him be destroyed in the comment section or something. Okay, and let him be destroyed in the comments or something. But so it's very interesting what he's changed to that. It's definitely been a positive for freedom of speech, though. Even if you're the section of the Wignats who are not happy that your little enclave has not been replatformed, largely most people got back on, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, if you do that Wignat stuff, you'll probably get boosted, man. Like those accounts, that
I've
that
seen Handsome
JQ,
Truth back on.
yeah, the JQ schizo posting is right up in the algorithm, man. You'll probably get more clicks just by pushing that stuff. Like they don't censor it at all, really.
Yeah, I even saw Eric Stryker's still on there complaining today, like going at war with Keith Woods, this famous old battle, where he's saying Keith Woods or he's saying Nick Fuentes was a Fed sent to destroy him. And that,
Delusions of grandeur, huh?
have you seen
He
that
was
one?
sent
That
to, yeah, he was sent
his
to
claim,
destroy me personally because I'm king. I am the Fuhrer.
yeah, his claim is that in 2018, the CIA or somebody got an 18-year-old Nick Fuentes to destroy the popular support for Eric Stryker and TRS, and so it's just incredible delusions of grandeur.
It's just schizophrenic paranoia, delusions of grandeur mixed with alcohol, probably a bit of cocaine.
Yeah,
Lay off the
yeah,
cocaine there, buddy.
yes, yeah. So what? I guess we've done the lead in then. What are your? I know I know that you have historical arguments with the Wignats, and what is your, I don't know, can you give me like a broad brush take on what your criticisms are of the general people, like the 4chan crowd, the TRS crowd, the people who, I don't know, the people who get red pilled and go completely J-spazzing, etc.
Yeah, it's what I call a meme ideology. So they start off on 4chan, they start off on the greatest meme never told documentaries, Europa:
Yeah.
The Last Battle, and they just consume all this junk content online that is produced by just complete amateurs. People who are not historians, people who don't actually look at legit sources. They just meme it, and they get sucked into the rabbit hole, and they become these like totally unhinged schizos that they really think they've got the truth now. It's like this revelation, and their life is been thrown upside down, and they have this new worldview, and they become extremely aggressive in pushing their newfound truth. And this is essentially what that is, right? A ton of these people are very new to it, and you can tell when they're new to it because they're pushing the same kind of meme talking points, right? You know, they hit the Hitler stuff, they get into that, they get into World War II stuff, but they don't question what they're seeing, right? They don't question these documentaries or these websites. They only question what they think is the mainstream stuff, right? And it's very obvious that most of them have never even read the sources that they're claiming to adopt, right? Like they haven't read Mein Kampf. There's no question, because these guys are going around saying stuff like, Hitler loved all white people and he was just for white people, man. And then there's so much in Mein Kampf where he's like calling Slavs an inferior race and advocating for taking over Russia. And they don't even know that. Like, that's how stupid they are. They don't even, because basically the Wignats, what they do, the gurus, they don't put in those quotes, right? They don't give you that information. They just cherry pick out what they think will get them the most clicks or will get them the most donations, right? And so they've mean this like pan-white ideology out of this, which was not a pan-European philosophy at all. It was a pan-Germanic philosophy exclusively for Germans, that saw the Slavs mainly as their enemy, to be colonized. And so that's like the main thing I've been critiquing and pointing out to them, is that that philosophy, if you're Slavic or Mediterranean, you certainly won't fit in there. I mean, they view you as like equivalent to BLM views these white libtards, they're cannon fodder, useful idiots.
Yeah.
And that's how they view it, right? Because as soon as you don't agree with the ideology, all of a sudden you're not white anymore. You're a dirty med, right? So like this is how they operate. They operate on a racial, within whites, on a racial hierarchy where they got Northwest Europeans at the top, maybe Slavs in the middle and Meds on the bottom, and they'll tactically use the race card when you don't fit in with their ideology, right? And so that's what I noticed them doing, and it's not only that, but it's terrible optics. I mean, look at them running around in public dressed like ISIS terrorists, screaming about fucking Hitler all day. Like it's totally counterproductive politically. I think it took me a while to figure that out, that it wasn't going anywhere, and that's why they scream about no political solutions, because they know that marching around in the streets, goose stepping and screaming about Hitler is not going to win power anywhere. And so they have to say there's no political solution to convince their little club of people to keep paying into their grift, demoralize them and keep them paying into their grift, and build up some kind of little enclave or something somewhere in the forest, in the woods. And that's all it is. That's all it ever amounts to. And look how spurgy they are. Look how they turn on each other and backstab each other, and it's all fucking Jerry Springer garbage. So I realized it's a low IQ movement. It's literally like those people you would see on Jerry Springer he would bring up these retards to make white nationalism look stupid.
Yes,
And
KKK kids and all that stuff.
yeah, that's what they are, man. They're just extremely emotional as well. You can see how emotional they are when you question their logic, and because there's like a fear there. They fear that, oh shit, maybe they don't have it all figured out, and maybe they were misled to some degree. And if you're injecting logic into it, they don't want to hear that because they've developed this rigid. They put up a barrier to any new information coming in, right? So it's like a cult. It operates like a cult.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's some smart ones around who, like, look, let's just name some names. Well, in Australia, like what Joel Davis has gotten himself caught up in. What do you think of this? This NSN movement and these people walking around in all. You mentioned it, like they look like ISIS terrorists, and they're on. But I do know a couple of kids who are like tangentially associated with that group on Telegram, and they think they're doing the right thing. They think that that somebody needs to like explicitly advocate for white people. They don't see any contradictions in this Hitler ideology, even though it's like front and center. They do believe that like it was a grand conspiracy against Germany in the 1930s, that literally Hitler did nothing wrong. And
Yeah, it's meme shit.
yeah.
I mean, just look at the results. I mean, they're all getting arrested. I mean, this is just a typical trajectory of those groups. As they go out, they do these performative stunts. They get arrested, right? They purposefully do provocative stunts to get arrested, and then the grift is, oh, we've been arrested. Here's the GoFundMe page. Give us $10,000, right? And it's like the same kind of circle jerk grift they do every time. It's the same with all those groups, is they have to act like they're being persecuted so they can get more and more money, right? You could do those things. You can advocate for white people without dressing up like an ISIS terrorist and screaming about Hitler in the streets. You're not going to win it over any normal people doing that. You're going to win over psychos, and you're going to attract the trash, mentally ill people like Rockwell did, one of whom killed him. Right?
Yes.
That's what that ends in. It ends in an internal bloodbath and infighting, because they're all a bunch of schizos trying to be the Fuhrer, right? It attracts that kind of personality type who wants to be the Fuhrer, and everybody else has to get in line. So you're going to see a lot of those groups implode into infighting very quickly, and it's very obvious why. It's because the ideology is flawed in and of itself. So there's a couple smart ones. There's a couple intellectuals in that scene, but look how poorly their optics are. I mean, look how they end up in prison, or like you could do those same protests, but just don't use slurs or talk about Hitler, and you wouldn't be hit with hate speech charges. If there's hate speech charges in your country, then you have to be a little bit tactful. Right? Like if like it's like a German guy, he knows that it's illegal to show the swastika in public or to talk about Hitler, and then he does it anyway. And the reason he's doing it is just to be a martyr and to have people like you and praise you on the internet. Like that's all there is to it, right? I mean, but they're not going to gain power doing that, and they know that, and that's why they're just doing these stupid stunts to get, because they actually want the police to crack down on them. And that's what that guy said. Like Sewell, the guy who runs that group, he said that in multiple streams. He's like, I want to be a lightning rod. I'm attracting the heat. I'm attracting the police attention. I want to do this to essentially like prop himself up as a martyr so that he can be immortalized or whatever, right? So that's what they're doing. They're purposefully trying to do that. And it just seems like a bit of grift, right? I mean, they're always putting up a new GoFundMe every time they get arrested. Like Look, I disagree with them being arrested. I disagree with any hate speech laws. I
Sure,
think that
sure.
those laws need to be rescinded. However, if they exist, right? They exist, and you can't snap your fingers and remove them. And so you have to be tactful and be smart about what you're doing. And I think you'll probably avoid a lot of the legal problems. There may still be legal problems that come your way. So I'm not saying nothing should be done, but you have to have a certain presentation style that normal people can look at and say, oh, that these are a group of guys that sound smart, they look smart, and I might want to get involved with that. But with those groups, I mean, look at their optics, man. Like, it's just it's clownish. It is Jerry Springer.
Yeah, I don't know if I should go here, but let me ask the question anyway. What what is this O9A affiliation that's going on? They're all into it, aren't they? It's basically Satanism, and it's rife within this group. Is this just being edgy? Do they believe it? What the fuck is going on? I mean, I've seen some of the stuff posted on Telegram by, the people who talk about this stuff, and it's, and I've seen some of the links to, like, I'd rather not mention the group's names because we're on YouTube, but
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned
yeah.
one in the chat. Yeah, the one in the UK was run by a guy who's a pedophile. Like they caught him grooming boys on Facebook. When you look at these O9A groups, like these outright Hitlerite groups, they're always run by some kind of freak pedophile or criminal. The James Mason guy was convicted for producing child pornography, literally.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There was the guy who was pushing the O9A satanic shit. His name was something Sutter. I forget his first name, but he was an FBI informant, literally. He was a criminal that the FBI pulled out of prison and just put him up to it, right? And he just published all these books trying to merge together National Socialism and Satanism. And that's really what it is, man. These guys, they behave like that. They behave like actual fucking Satanists, right? They advocate for terrorism. They advocate for law breaking. They're like white Sharia, so they advocate for essentially child brides. They want to get like,
holy fuck.
Yeah, they're advocating for like 14-year-old white chicks to be turned into baby factories and stuff. So they're literally white nationalist versions of ISIS. And you wonder why they're all getting fucking raided. You wonder why they're all going to jail. You're doing it yourself, man. If you run around in public advocating for, like, they'll kind of undercover do it. They'll be like, oh, we don't advocate for violence, but then you go into their chat rooms and it's just all like Fed posting 24/7. And I had to clean all that shit out because they were doing that with me a couple years ago when I was kind of in that. These guys would incessantly just come into my chat room and spam their Fed posting shit. It's just 24/7 Fed posting. And if you weren't agreeing with them, they would call you a cuck, right? You're just a cuck and you're weak.
Yes.
And so that's how they pull you into it. They try to shame you into their little terror game.
Yeah.
And so it's just riddled with feds. I mean, you see like Boneface, that freak. He's like a meth dealing junkie. And he's like the face of that crew in the U.S., like Handsome Truth. I mean, all of these people are low IQ. They're criminals. They all have a criminal background. That's what I noticed. That the skinhead movement is a criminal movement. It's just a gang. It's a prison gang. And they operate like a prison gang, right? They protect their own and they go after anyone who criticizes them, whatever, right? It operates like a fucking prison gang. And it is. And it's the same with that group in Australia. They are actually recruiting criminals out of prisons, like skinheads, who have criminal records.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they came out. They directly recruit from prison.
Holy fuck. Yeah, I mean, what would you say to people? They'll be listening and they'll say, oh, you're just like, you're anti-white if you're doing this. You're picket. we're called Nazis anyway, and we're just like fighting for the white man, and and all this nonsense, and they take issue with you criticizing the fact that they are the ones, in quotes, on the streets taking action, fighting back, etc.
Yeah, then there's it's like oh, they might call you a faggot. That doesn't mean you should be one. Like it's just a stupid attitude. It's like, oh, they can call you anything, and you just have to adopt that optics and be what they're calling you. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, politics is about optics. I mean, you do have to present yourself well to the public to get anywhere, really. And these guys are purposely, I view them as like the turd in the punch bowl. It's like they're trying to prop themselves up as the spokesman for white people. It's almost like it's like BLM for blacks and the ADL for Jews, and these guys are trying to prop themselves up as the spokesman for white people, and then they're associating it with deranged schizophrenic ideologies and like criminality and like ISIS terror optics. I mean, they're trying to make it look bad. They're trying to demonize it, is what they're doing. I mean, if someone wanted to demonize white identity politics, well, what do? Well, put on a black mask and run around the streets screaming about Hitler and all this, right? So we shouldn't allow them to take over white identity politics and make themselves the standard, because their standard is so low. It's so incredibly low, and the quality of people they bring in are trash, and they won't lead to a successful political movement, right? You can't have low IQ people or criminals and actually win politically. It's impossible. You need smart people. You need intellectual people. You need people with money. You need people with connections. You don't need a bunch of thieves and criminals and meth dealers and pedophiles, satanic fucking pedophiles, literally people who have been charged with having child pornography and being fucking pedophiles. These are not the people you want running your movement, right? It's just a cesspit. It needs to be criticized, and more people need to start doing it, or else they're just going to keep doing that shit and make us all look stupid. That's why Jared Taylor doesn't associate with them, right?
Yeah, for real. Are you aware of that clip from way back in the day of William Luther Pierce, literally their own guy, who has that criticism of them, and where he says, it took me a long time to realize to shun these people. It's
I've seen that, yeah. So even him, and he was a Wignat himself, right?
Yeah, I've actually got it on my Rolodex of clips here. If anybody hasn't seen it, let me just play 30 seconds of it. I think it's here. Here it is.
This is something that is obvious to many of the people that we want, but it took me a few years to learn the hard way to shun hobbyists, to have zero tolerance for people who like to dress up in uniforms and shout 1488 and give Roman salutes to TV cameras. And I suspect that there still are a few alliance people who haven't yet developed zero tolerance for these freaks. And that's why I harp on the subject so often. Ultimately, we need many more people than we have now, but we need winners, not losers.
So there we have it. I'm glad I had that clip in my Rolodex here.
Yeah, there it is with Bonehead, the leader of the white race, Bonehead. He's literally got arrested. Well, he's arrested his whole life. He's a congenital criminal. He's like a genetic criminal, right? And he got arrested again for theft. He was arrested for dealing meth or selling meth.
Yeah.
And I remember I was looking at, when that shit was happening, I was looking at it, and that other guy in that clip, the skinhead, he was like,
it's Blood Tribe, isn't it?
Yeah, he's like, I actually like the optics of Bonehead. I think we need to lean into these optics. Yeah, that's gonna win, man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do they do other than march around and act like retards? Like what do they do politically? Like are they running for city council? Imagine running for city council with that stupid tattoo on your face. Like let me
I
just
think
tattoo a
actually,
swastika on my forehead and run for city council. See who's
yeah.
gonna.
I think actually, like the product of what they do tends to actually be like to get hate speech legislation enacted where otherwise it wouldn't be. Like I seem to think that they are like on some level they've been running around Florida. Like the GDL's been running around Florida basically for the last 5 years, haven't they? Harassing Jews and harassing various people, and Florida is basically instrumental in like trying to bring in basically some form of hate speech legislation in response to what they're actually doing. And it's the same in Australia. I think like that network has directly been responsible for getting like some definitely getting their flag banned, and maybe the salute in public. This is all in response to what they've been doing. So then they can go, then they can come out and go, look, we're being oppressed, and the state is trying to crush our free speech.
Yeah, that's part of the grift, right? Is they have to present themselves as persecuted so they can get you to donate to them. Otherwise, people just wouldn't part with their money, right? There may be some truth to that. Like, obviously we can say as a caveat, we don't agree with the hate speech laws. We're against them. But these guys are like trying to provoke a backlash, a legal backlash that they know is going to come.
Yeah.
And in
I've
Florida,
got friends who think it's the ADL running the GDL. Basically, I'll just say it. They think it's the ADL running the GDL to
just
to
two competing.
create the anti-Semitism so they can fight against it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if think about it, like if the ADL wanted to, beef up the anti-Semitism laws, well, what would they do? Well, set up the
Yes.
GDL to go do that shit.
Exactly. It makes so much sense when you think about it.
I call them two competing gangs.
Yeah.
Even the name is similar. But
Yeah.
as far as direct evidence of that, I don't think we have direct evidence of that. But I think they would go around Florida and just throw those stupid flyers on the lawns of actual Jews. Like they go to some like Jewish neighborhood and do it. But what would be the fucking point of that? Like, are you red pilling the Jews with your flyers? Other than to just be a provocateur and get the
No,
media.
you're going to get them to go to government and say, we need to stop these people immediately.
Yeah, it's so clownish. I mean, these guys go up to city council and they're like, Hitler. Here's a meme flyer. Jews, Hitler, man.
Yeah.
It's just all entertainment. It's literally like the Jerry Springer wing of white nationalism. I mean, none of the real like intellectual types take those guys seriously. They think they're retards, but Taylor and Greg Johnson, these people, but
Yeah.
they've pretty much sapped up like what was left of like the people doing the Omegle shit, all the teenagers, the angst teenagers, incels sitting in their basements. Like that's pretty much what that is.
Yeah, you mentioned that like the intellectuals obviously aren't doing this, but there is an element of the intellectual old alt-right, dissident right, who are basically Third Reich enthusiasts, Third Reich sympathizers, probably like Greg Johnson, Mark Collett, that there is these people who definitely have. I mean, a friend of mine calls it the big stinking turd that's under the carpet of the dissident right, and you walk in and you can smell it, but you might not be able to see it immediately. But you pull back the rug of the dissident right, and there it is. It's basically a Third Reich sympathy cult.
Yeah, like they just basically most of these people, all they care about is like the JQ thing. So like they don't give a fuck about the details of this, right? They don't care that Hitler was anti-Slavic and that he, invaded Russia for the purposes of colonizing it and killed millions of white people. They don't give a fuck about the details, right? They just care that he hated the Jays and he was saving the world from the Jays, man, which is complete garbage because, before Hitler invaded the Soviet Union, first of all, he made the deal with the Soviet Union, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So why is he making a deal with the Judeo-Bolsheviks, right? If you really thought Jewish Bolsheviks were running the Soviet Union, then why the hell did he sign the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact to help Stalin expand the Soviet Union into Poland? And why would the Judeo-Bolsheviks in Russia make that deal? It's clearly because there weren't that many in there. In fact, Hitler said privately that Stalin had purged them out of the Soviet government, and that's why he made the deal. He said he didn't believe Jews ran the Soviet Union. He said Stalin did. He said it'd been Slavified. Bolshevism was Slavified, and that's why he made the deal with Stalin. And Stalin fired Litvinov, who was the foreign minister of the Soviet Union, who was Jewish. He fired him specifically to please Hitler and to sign the deal. And so that's total proof that neither Stalin or Hitler either believed Jews were running that. And so it had nothing to do with that.
Interesting. Yeah.
It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with what he said in Mein Kampf, which is that we need additional living space. We need to expand our territory. And so we're going to invade Ukraine and Russia to take the land space, the oil, and everything they needed to create the new the Third Reich Empire.
Yeah, I think it's on the first page, literally on Mein Kampf, isn't it, that Austria will be part of, I think it says Austria needs to be like taken back by Germany, and then it begins to talk about we need living space in the east, in Russia explicitly, and what is between Germany on the map and Russia? Well, it's Poland. And so, obviously, I mean, I had somebody arguing with me in good faith that because it never explicitly said in Mein Kampf that Hitler wanted Poland, he only said he wanted to take living space in Russia, therefore he never intended to actually invade Poland. I'm like, this just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, he wanted to he said right in Mein Kampf he wanted a contiguous land space. So that's why he said he didn't want colonies. Like he didn't want colonies in Africa because it wasn't connected to the homeland, to the motherland. So he had to go right through Poland to get at Russia. So of course he was going to colonize that. And he started to do so. Right when he invaded Poland, he started to move Poles on trains, put them on trains and ship them into the general government, that smaller piece of territory that they'd allocated for the Poles. And they started to colonize the north and western parts of the country. So it's just a total lie. And they don't even read this stuff, man. That's the thing, is they don't read the books. They just go off this greatest story meme bullshit on these websites. And when they're corrected on it, they just move the goalposts and just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter anyway. He hated the Jays, so he's a real hero, And it sort of ties in with the Putin thing, right? It's very similar, right? Putin is doing his own version of Lebensraum in Ukraine, right? He's expanding the Russian territory to include Russian speakers, and the parallels are pretty incredible with like Hitler's foreign policy and Putin's. In fact, Putin defended Hitler's foreign policy. He had to because he was asked about it, and he blamed Poland for not appeasing Hitler. He says it's Poland's fault they were invaded. They didn't appease Hitler. So of course he says that because he's invading Ukraine and he's blaming Ukraine for not appeasing him. Right?
Yeah. It's interesting. So I guess that was the lead into Russia then. You brought up the parallels. You are infamously perhaps, like pro-Ukrainian in this conflict. This goes against the majority of the right wing. Somehow the dissident right, the right wing, is like, I don't know, my assessment would be like 80% pro-Putin somehow, pro-Russian. Why do you think the
Yeah.
dissident right is is in favor of Putin, is like pro-Putin? They believe he's like the trad savior of the West. All these fucking memes that they pitch about it. What's your assessment? First of all, why are you pro-Ukrainian? Give us the pitch, and then maybe what you think about the dissident right and why they're not.
Well, it's not necessarily being pro-Ukrainian specifically. Ukraine just happens to be the country that has been attacked by Russia, and so my viewpoint is that I support national sovereignty within Europe. So it wouldn't matter if it was Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, or Ukraine being invaded. I would support any one of those countries that was being invaded and attacked. And I support their independence from Russia because they are distinct cultures and languages, and they won their independence fair and square. And so I think we should support it. And secondly, because I am genuinely pro-white, I do believe it's a bad thing when white people are being killed en masse the way they are in Ukraine. And some other people don't really apply that principle consistently, as you can see, right? They're pro-white. Their pro-whiteism ends where Russia's foreign policy begins, right? They really care about white lives until those white lives are in Ukraine and Putin is the one killing them, with his little Chechen rape armies that he's sending in there. And so I always knew there was this bullshit narrative, like this Russian influence in the dissident right. I've seen that for years. I was calling that out in like 2015 with Spencer and his wife. They're tied in with Dugin. Dugin has colonized parts of the dissident right and co-opted them and turned them into propagandists. You had like Charles Bosman, who was guy American, but he did business in Russia, and he's a big Russophile. He ran that website Russia Insider, and he was like tied in with those TRS people. Like they had the barn that they held their meetings in was on his property, and he was trying to inject this pro-Russian narrative into the right. So they're throwing their money around. You've seen that, right? You saw that with Tenet media scandal. Russian businessmen are throwing their money around. They're trying to buy people off on the right and the left. They're trying to buy everyone off, really.
Yeah.
And so that's my main thing about Ukraine. They totally embellish all these Kremlin narratives. Oh, it's a coup, 2014 coup, my CIA, and all that.
Can you tell me about that? This is the main narrative people say to me, right? And the one I know least about. They tell me 2014 was a CIA coup, and therefore it is justified for Putin to basically do anything, to do what he is doing now in response to basically America cooing Ukraine, Victoria Nuland, all this, this kind of stuff that we hear. Is that the
this
truth?
is the standard Kremlin stuff. It's just a massive exaggeration, right? So let's look, first of all, what is a coup? A coup is when one faction of the government takes over another faction. That's not what happened there, right? It was a revolution from the streets. It was millions of people going to the streets to fight against or to demand the resignation of Yanukovych. And then he sent the police in to shut them down. And then things dovetailed after that and spiraled out of control after that. And police shot various people. And eventually the Ukrainian parliament voted to push him out. And then he left the country voluntarily. I mean, if that's a coup, that's a very strange coup, right? Coup is usually when one group within the government just removes the guy and puts him in prison and takes over. But that's not what happened. He voluntarily fled the country. And then after that, they had an election, and they allowed different parties to run in that election, including a pro-Russian party run by Viktor Medvedchuk, who is friends with Putin, and his daughter, the godfather of his daughter, is Vladimir Putin. This guy was allowed to run in the elections, and that party won seats. That party won seats in the Ukrainian government. And so, it's a weird kind of coup where the coup plotters are allowing opposition parties to run who support Russian or pro-Russian. And then the Newland shit, that's like their sacred cow, right? It's like, oh, look, she's
Yes.
on a phone call where she's talking about Yatsenyuk and Klitschko going into the government. So Johnny Gatt did a whole documentary refuting these main points. And basically there was meddling, like Victoria Nuland was there as, you know, representative of the US government, and she was getting involved. You could say she was meddling in the situation, no question. But in that phone call, she was not talking about doing a coup. She was talking with the US ambassador to Ukraine, and she was talking about a deal that Yanukovych himself had proposed, where he offered Yatsenyuk and Klitschko positions in his own government. It was like a power sharing agreement that he proposed. And so when she's saying, "Oh, I think Yatsenyuk should go in the government, but not Klitschko," whatever, that was her talking about Yanukovych's own proposal. It wasn't her like handpicking the coup government. Those two guys were already like the leaders of the opposition, who Yatsenyuk and Yanukovych were having discussions together already. And so, yeah, that's a totally embellished, massively embellished and out of context point that they make. And then they had an election. Poroshenko won. Then they had an election a few years later, and yet Zelensky beat Poroshenko. So if the handpicked guy is Poroshenko, then why would they let some new guy come in and beat him a few years later? Because it was just a real election, right? And they were letting the people of Ukraine decide who was going to go in the government, right? So you can say there's meddling on both sides. The U.S. meddled, but Russia was clearly meddling in there as well to shut down the protests and back up Yanukovych. But that doesn't prove it's a coup. And secondly, these same people crying about coups support fucking coups everywhere. They support a violent invasion of Ukraine right now to do a coup, right?
For
to
real.
do a violent, for real coup right now. They want to kill Zelensky. They support killing Zelensky and killing thousands of Ukrainians to change the government. So don't fucking tell me about coup, right?
I'd never thought of it like that. Oh my God, you're right.
And they support, you know, Assad. Assad's father did a coup when he came to power. They supported Gaddafi. He came to power in a coup. Saddam Hussein came to power in a fucking coup. These people are not against coups. Let's stop kidding ourselves, right? They're full of shit. They want to do a coup themselves. They're revolutionaries and shit, right? So they're full of it. They're just tactically using the argument to justify violence against Ukraine.
Yeah, that's crazy. I had never thought of it like that, so I'll have that talking point ready next time someone says it to me. Do you think there's any justification for this area on it's on the western, on the eastern side of Ukraine, where they're Russian speakers? They were being oppressed. This is the narrative. They're being oppressed. You know, Russia had to come in and basically save them. In many ways, like you say, parallels to what Hitler was saying about German-speaking populations in, Poland, Czechia, Poland, whatever. Is there any truth to that, or is that embellished in your opinion?
Oh, it's massively embellished. First of all, most Ukrainians speak Russian. I mean, it's a widely spoken language in Ukraine. So this idea that if you speak Russian, Russia gets to come and take you back. I mean, it's just patently insane. I mean, this would be like England saying, we get to take back Canada and we get to take back America. You speak English. Or it's like France saying Quebec belongs to France. Essentially, that's the argument, right? Now, as far as Eastern Ukrainians, they were voting in all the elections. They voted for independence as well in 1991. They didn't want to be part of Russia themselves until Putin started to stir things up there and made a political issue out of it after 2014. There was definitely some sentiment there that was against the Maidan. There was definitely some people who were against the Maidan revolution and didn't want it and wanted to go back to Yanukovych or whatever. But they had an election after the Maidan revolution, and so they got to vote in that election, and they voted for Medvedchuk, that pro-Russian candidate. So they were able to participate in an election after the revolution. So it wasn't, quote, a coup and they suppressed us and are going to kill us. No, that's all trumped up crap. Russian language was never banned. It's not banned today. Anyone saying that is just a lying retard, right? They speak Russian on Ukrainian television even today. Zelensky speaks Russian. Yatsenyuk, the guy that came to power after Maidan, gave a speech in Russian in which he says we're not actually pursuing NATO membership in Russian. You know, it's just crazy that they've gotten away with saying that because there's no law that says Russian's banned. They demoted it from like the status that it had prior to 2014. So it had a higher status where like you could use Russian in the government buildings and stuff. And they said, no, we want only Ukrainian in the government buildings, but you can speak Russian and it's allowed in the schools and it's allowed in the media. And secondly, those rebels started to seize government buildings and such and basically kicked off the civil war. I mean, Vladimir Putin came to power on putting down Chechen separatists, right? So it's kind of rich that Vladimir Putin is the one saying, states don't have the right to fight back against armed separatists, when that's exactly what he did in 1999 to come to power, right? He bombed Grozny. He carpet bombed Grozny. He leveled the damn place. He had massive anti-terrorist operations in Chechnya for a decade after that, for 10 years. And he installed Kadyrov, right? So he's totally full of shit to say that Ukraine has no right to fight against armed separatists. Every country does that, right? When Basque separatists were blowing up cars and shit in Spain, they fought against that, right? So, and secondly, there's no justification for him invading. He was claiming there's a Donbass genocide, right? They all go off about this crap. There's a genocide in the Donbass. So if you look at the death count, so you go back to 2014, there was 2,000 people died on both sides in 2014. That was the highest casualty rate. So Putin did not think that it was justified to invade Ukraine in 2014, despite a high death count there in the fighting. But in 2022, there was 21. The death count dropped to 21, according to the UN, on both sides. So 21 civilians were killed on both sides. The war was pretty much grinding to a halt. Even, what's his name? Prigozhin said that. Prigozhin, before he was assassinated by Putin, he said that he went on a video and says, the Kremlin lied to us. We went into Donbass saying there was a genocide there. There wasn't. There were very few casualties. There was barely any fighting going on. So it was just a trumped up lie, right? He was just invoking emotional propaganda to justify the invasion, right? Similar to what Hitler was doing. It's really the same stuff, right? Our people are being persecuted, so we have to invade you. And in the East, of course, those Russian separatists completely banned Ukrainian language in the schools. As soon as they took over, Russian language took over. Most Ukrainians or people who identified with Ukraine were chased out of the place. Right? They're terrorized. They're run out of town, just like Crimea. So it's all selective bullshit. And yeah, NATO expansion. I mean, Putin just said the other day, he was asked about the war and he's like, yeah, well, we were kind of getting bored over here. When there's no action, we get bored in Russia. So we had to launch the war. Right. I mean, NATO expansion that's crazy. It's just a nice little boogeyman he uses to justify expansion. It makes sense why he would use that, right? Like, you need a reason to justify your expansion, so you just project the image that there's this external threat that you need to push back, and so it gives you.
He actually denied that on Tucker, didn't he? Tucker gave him the softball opening because Tucker had to do that little speech at the start of the interview saying, "I was shocked. I thought, that he was going to give us a monologue about Russia being under threat from NATO expansion." And he didn't. Instead, he gave us this 30-minute long history lesson that basically explains Ukraine belongs to Russia and therefore I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, even in his opening war speech, he mentioned NATO expansion a little bit, But like you know, it's just like this side note. Like it's just it's propaganda that he's just whipping out to scare people, to scare Russians. NATO has already been on his border for decades in Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, right? And Russia and NATO have an agreement in 1997. They made an agreement called the NATO-Russia Founding Act, in which they have like checks and balances. Like NATO can't just install like nukes on the border with Russia. There's agreements that can't happen. There's agreements that like Russia can inspect some of the missile systems and stuff in these countries to prove they're not offensive. But it's all kind of rich coming from Russia. I mean, Russia has offensive weapons on the border of Ukraine, but Ukraine's supposed to sit back and be okay with that. Why is it that Russia gets these rights and Ukraine doesn't? It's just all like might makes right. We're the big power, so we get to do things that you don't.
Yeah, what would you say to the people who say that the Ukrainians should should just surrender, that they don't want to, that it's either silly to fight, or they shouldn't fight, or they don't, or even people are saying they don't want to fight, and that it's the West that is arming them and prolonging the war and making them fight on, and that this is ultimately leading to more and more casualties. People even frame it as they tell you that for believing that Ukraine should have the right to defend itself, you are the one who is the pro-war candidate. So have you come across this? They say, why are you in favor of war?
It's like Ukraine, it's a total inversion.
Yes,
it's an inversion of reality. It's a Kremlin. It's Kremlin spin. I mean, this is how they frame everything. It's like, we're prosecuting the war against you, but defending yourself and asking for help is the real aggression, right? Is the real aggression. It's aggression to want to push Russian soldiers out of territory that was illegally taken from Ukraine. And I would ask these people, like, what if China had invaded? What if China had invaded Australia? Would you be telling the Australians to give up? Would you be telling them not to defend themselves? Would you be lecturing others in the West who advocated for supporting Australia that you're a warmonger for wanting to back up your ally? Right. And they don't apply this in the reverse, right? Like they never say that Russia is prolonging the war in Syria by backing up Assad. Right. They never say Russia's, Assad's a bad guy for asking for help from Russia to back him up against his enemies. It's always just this one-way thing, this tactical, again, selective and tactical argument to try to demoralize the Ukrainians and the allies supporting them. Of course, it's not aggression to defend yourself. Of course, it's not aggression for Western countries to give weapons to Ukraine to defend itself. They are defensive weapons. And Ukraine has the right to strike back at the aggressor in his own territory. That's lawful. I mean, that's totally legal according to the rules of war. So no. I mean, look, I think that it's a tough situation. Like the Ukrainians are at a disadvantage, of course, militarily. So they're not going to be able to take back all of the territory that they've lost. There's no question about that. And I've said at the beginning that they're going to have to give up Crimea. There's no way they can get that back. They probably will have to give up parts of the Donbass, but everything beyond that, I think they have every right to defend and to hold their territory and to push back the aggressor. And if Eastern Europeans want security and want to deter this aggressor, obviously they're going to have to back up Ukraine. It's not really up to me, though. I mean, it's up to the Ukrainians. If the Ukrainians don't want to fight the war anymore, then they're going to have to change their government. And it doesn't seem like they're doing that right now, right? They're not doing a revolution, a new Maidan on Zelensky yet. So we'll just see where it goes. But those arguments are absolutely disingenuous.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that people in the dissident right who put out this stuff, that they have been co-opted by Kremlin talking points. Is this active measures? I've got a friend who tells me that it's active measures. I mean, there's that famous clip of Yuri Bezmenov back in the 1980s where he comes to America and he explains that 80% of the work of the KGB is not involved in like James Bond spy fantasy shit that you see on television. It's actually in ideological subversion and in active measures, and to insert themselves secretly and covertly into positions where they change narratives over time and they influence people and they attempt to change opinions in the West. Do you think that people on, otherwise our side of the political aisle, who care about the West and about demographics and white identities, but have sympathies with Russia, do you think that they are ideologically mistaken, or is Russia a friend that we can look to also?
Well, there's a few different types of what we call like vatniks. There's like ones who have been ideologically hijacked. So there's a few trends like, these Orthodox Christian LARPers, the ones, a lot of them are converts to Orthodox Christianity, and they see Russia as the great hub of Orthodoxy, and so we have to support that. I mean, that's almost no different than some fucking Muslim convert who's pledges allegiance to ISIS, in my opinion, right? It's like, imagine some white Canadian guy converts to Islam, and all of a sudden he's shilling for Al-Qaeda, and he's become a caliphate's lunatic. And it's very similar with those converts, is they view Russia as the spiritual center. Dude, most Russians don't even go to church. There's a thing showing that only 12% of Russians attend church regularly. It's like one of the lowest in the whole Western world. Wow. More American Christians go to church regularly than Russian. And it showed in that poll, is Levada poll, that the Russian Orthodox Christianity, like this religious LARP that they're doing, is totally performative, that most Christians in Russia only do it for like ritualistic reasons. Like, during Easter, they'll do like some of the processions or whatever, but like they don't actually regularly attend church. And I just saw another story came out saying that there's a ton of occultism going on in Russia, like witchcraft and occultism. And there's been a huge uptick in this since the war started in 2022. So it's just a lie that it's like this super religious trad paradise. This is what the Kremlin puts out in terms of propaganda, right? Putin will go into a church and meet with the priest and light a candle, but this is all for show. And so there's those people. Then there's like these nihilists who are accelerationists, and they just think the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So I support any fucking government out there that's fighting against my government. Okay, so by that logic, you would support, Al-Qaeda and ISIS who attack your civilians. By that logic, you would support North Korea, China, just about any government, the Taliban. And that's sort of what you see, right? You saw Fuentes doing that too. He was praising the Taliban when they took over Afghanistan. He was praising China. It's this weird American thing going on. It's this enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so that's sort of what motivates some of that sentiment. Those ones will probably admit the flaws of Putin in Russia, but they're just going to do this LARP to try to get money. It looks like a lot of them are trying to get money. They're just putting out the messaging that we love Russia in the hopes that they're going to get some rubles slipped under the table there. And then there's another portion who's just straight bought off. These people are just paid directly by the Kremlin. You saw the tenant media people, Lauren Chen, being directly funded by a Russian businessman to put out pro-Kremlin and anti-Ukraine bullshit. And then you saw Tim Pool was associated with that.
£100,000 a show, wasn't it, or something crazy?
Yeah, something insane. Him and Benny Johnson is total, like, Benny Johnson is just like the king of slop content. I mean, he's an idiot, right? Yeah. Like, he's dumb, but like they were both pushing like we're against aid to Ukraine thing. They were very heavily pushing that. And then Tim Pool's on a clip where he's like, Ukraine is our greatest enemy in the world. It's like, yeah, you're paid off, big guy. So it's very clearly payoffs going on. And then you have this Dugin thing. So Dugin pretty much hijacked the alt-right back in 2016 through Spencer. Spencer's since abandoned that position because he divorced his wife, who is Russian, and she was a big Dugin shill.
Oh, by the way, on
and
that,
now-
have you seen that Spencer has actually since questioned himself openly if he was subject to like a Russian intelligence op? He literally has asked the question if Nina was like, I don't know, a Russian state operative sent to like influence him.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was actually implying that at the time. when
Yeah,
that
he's
was
asked the
happening.
question himself. Yeah.
I was saying that, and that's why the early alt-right guys disliked me, because I was calling them out on that, even in 2015, 2016, 2017. If you go on my website, you can find various articles where I was calling them out on this Russo shilling. And yeah, so there's this Dugin thing. He's definitely influenced like those French New Right people. He was tied in with them, and he's injected pro-Kremlin ideas in there. And he's slippery little snake, that guy, man. He worms his way into everything, and he pushes the narrative. He's even got Alex Jones co-opted, right? Alex Jones got co-opted somewhere around 2008. He started shilling Putin hardcore. RT Media, they've
Well,
monopolized.
shall we look at some of your? This is what you. I got these posts off of Martinez's Telegram, which I am a fan of, by the way. It's linked in the description as well as all his links. So this was initially where I think I found your Telegram, and you started posting these things. So go ahead. You mentioned Alex.
Yeah, Alex, like people will call him like an Israeli shill or whatever. I think the more likely is that he's a Russian shill, and he's being paid by these guys, if anything. He's had Dugin on the show multiple times. He's been on Russian TV, but with that Solikov guy, I forget his name. He's the big propagandist on Russian TV. And Alex Jones, the fat retard that he is, he went on Russian TV and he's like, I know you guys are not expansionists, as they are literally expanding right now. Like, if that's not a payoff, I don't know what the hell is, right?
Yeah.
And he look what it says there. He reposted 1,000 RT articles on his website. He's just he's an aggregator for Russian propaganda is what he is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I do look back on myself and I realize that many people can just like be oblivious to this slow drip of Russian propaganda, because before the war, Russia Today used to be a TV channel in the UK, just available. And so I would naturally go and watch that because it like criticized the West. And so I have criticisms of the West, of our society, obviously. We all have massive criticisms. That's why we're here. And so Russia Today seemed to be the one echoing all this stuff. And I never really like critically thought, I'm like just listening to foreign propaganda here. There may be some truths to it, but I'm like just lapping up foreign propaganda. And that's probably not healthy for me.
Yeah, exactly. RT basically took over the alternative media, and it became like the source of information for a ton of people who didn't trust the mainstream media. And so they decided, oh, I don't believe anything that's on the mainstream media. So Russia Today criticizes my government, so it must be true. But obviously, Russia Today is not going to give you any real information about what's happening in Russia or in Ukraine.
Yeah, I remember watching this bitch back in the day.
Yeah, Abby Martin.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
So
been
literal Kremlin op. Yeah.
she whores herself out to any foreign government you can think of, right? Friggin', she worked for the Kremlin media. She worked for the Venezuelan state media. She's probably working for North Korean state media, Chinese. She is an outright Marxist who just hates the West and will support any shitbag regime that is anti-Western.
Yeah.
And of course, none of this means we love the current ruling governments of the West. That's not the point. All we're saying is that these other governments are just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah, absolutely. What was next on your list? Max Blumenthal. Who's this guy?
So this is like he's like a Jewish anti-Zionist guy. He's like obsessed with Israel. Like all his content revolves around Israel. Totally co-opted by RT. So this guy, he used to write for like some Lebanese periodical that was critical of Bashar al-Assad. No, sorry, he was critical of Bashar al-Assad, but the journal he wrote for was pro-Assad, and he quit the journal because they were so pro-Assad. And then he actually ended up, like a year or two later, he flipped his entire position, and then he started shilling for Assad and for Russia. And it was like coincided perfectly when he started to get appearances on Russia Today. So this guy is just a journalist for hire. And that's the thing with all of these alternative journalists, is that they need money and income sources, and they're basically blacklisted from the mainstream corporate media in the West.
Yeah.
And so the only way they can make a living is if they get involved with foreign regime media that actually has decent money to throw at them, instead of just begging for donations on the internet, right? And so this is what happens. They get co-opted.
It's like a pipeline, isn't it? It's a pipeline. Russia Today will have you. They might even pay you. So certainly before the war, before they were, before like taking money was sanctioned. So you like take up these jobs. I think we'll come to somebody in a moment.
Yeah, someone in the chat says, Mark Collette says he usually watches RT for his news. Says it all. Yeah, no shit, huh?
That was me back in 2015 or 2016, I'll be honest. Just that was me, bro. So.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald. Glenn freaking Greenwald. This little shithead.
Is Glenn is Glenn Greenwald, let me set it up, is Glenn Greenwald a journalist fighting for the truth? I mean, WikiLeaks and all this kind of stuff. He's just like this journalist on our side, isn't he?
No, he's a complete fraud, as all of these people are. So you can see here, he's on RT News. It says, Greenwald, I came to Russia to combat U.S.'s toxic view on the country. So what he's telling you is that he's literally a propagandist who's trying to whitewash Russia's foreign policy. And so, yeah, he's just one of these contrarians that doesn't get a lot of play on the mainstream media anymore. He did that Snowden story. That was his claim to fame. But once that shit died down, he was looking for new angles to resurrect the grift. And so he jumped on like the Russia-Ukraine stuff, and all he does now is just advocate for like abandoning Ukraine and letting Russia take over Ukraine. And he's just a weird freak. He's a gay lord as well. Yeah.
Lives in Brazil with his husband, who's just died very young of some mysterious illness.
Right, probably AIDS. But the fact is that the fact is that Glenny boy here, so Snowden is in Russia, right? So like this is very common. These dissidents, they flip to the other side.
So Snowden went to Glenn Greenwald with his hard drive of information and then fled to Russia. So what does this tell us about Snowden?
So he flees to Russia. So like that's another reason to question Glenn Greenwald here, because his main guy that made him famous is being protected by the Russians. And so if he pisses off the Russians or starts criticizing Russia and investigating them, they might kick Snowden out, right? So he has a vested interest into shilling for the Russians. And of course, there's the tie-in with Julian Assange. Julian Assange is a fraud as well, because he only releases
he's a warrior for the truth, isn't he?
Yeah. They're all warriors for the truth. They're all
heroes.
Free
But,
Julian, right?
Yeah, so Julian only publishes information that makes the U.S. government or NATO governments look bad, but he refuses. In fact, he was given a trove of documents that were relating to Russia, and he refused to publish them. You can go look that up. And then he got a show on Russia Today. Julian Assange had a literal show on Russia Today.
Wow. It's interesting what Damien says here in the chat. You have to admit, sometimes RT reporting the opposite of what the BBC was reporting, and you know RT's perspective was the truth. Well, this is what I was saying. I was that guy in like 2015 or 2016 thinking, wow, this information is based, it's correct, it's true. And this is like how they feed you in. It can be true. There can be some truths to what they're saying.
There can be truths to what they're saying, but it's usually related to like some topic that doesn't hurt Russia, right? So it's like, yeah, they might give you some truths about, why Western governments were duplicitous in the COVID lockdowns or some other foreign policy thing not related to Russia, but they don't report on the same shit going on in Russia. Like Russia had lockdowns, Russia had vaccines, all the same shit, and these dummies don't realize that because they get all their information from our team.
Yeah. What about this next guy then? This is a big one. Tucker Carlson. He's our guy, isn't he?
Tucker Carlson. Look at this freak. Yeah, this guy he's just gone nuts since he was fired from Fox News. He basically, what I think it is partially just contrarianism to the establishment media and such, because he was fired and kicked to the curb, and so now he's got this chip on his shoulder, and so now he's just doing this crazy opposite of the current thing journalism. That's his bit, not that intelligent. You listen to his interviews, he doesn't ask any good questions. He never questions these people he brings on his show. He just lets them spew their shit. Yeah. He goes to Russia to interview Putin and lets Putin spew off some fake history for an hour, barely interjects, sits there like a little bitch with his master leading him around on a leash. And then fucking Putin himself said that Tucker was a bitch and he didn't respect him because he's a little cuck. He's like, look at this guy just bowing to me. He doesn't respect that. He respects strength.
Yeah. Yeah, interestingly, Tucker, when he lost his show on Fox News, the first thing that he put out as an independent was the fucking UFO alien bullshit. I was like,
right, there it is.
What is he doing? What is he doing? Literally, everybody was waiting for him to publish his first thing. It got something like 90 million views, and it was, the government is hiding aliens.
Well, then the next one of the early interviews he did was with that freak homosexual who claimed he gave Barack Obama a blowjob, which is just completely just made up shit, right? He was just like literal like fucking like tabloid crap.
Yeah. Is it tabloid crap, or is he part of it, like trying to discredit right wingers? Because it makes us look insane. Isn't it?
Yeah, like they were mocking his ass for interviewing. That guy's a literal crackhead, like no credibility to his claims. And Tucker's just reeling him out. This is Obama. The guy's not even in office. Like, what the fuck was the point of that? He's just desperate for clicks and clickbait. And now he's saying he was attacked by a demon in his bed. I mean, he's literally like deranged.
Yeah. Let's run through another one. What about Douglas McGregor? He is a respected colonel who we can trust for information about the Russian war, isn't he?
That's what Tucker wants you to think, right? Fact is that this guy's just a complete moron. He's a drunk. He goes and just spouts off a bunch of stupid disinformation. This is a guy who claimed it was a 3-day war. He says the Russians are going to take it in 3 days. And then he kept moving the goalposts. And he's like, the Russians got them locked down now. Tucker, listen, Tucker, the Russians have them surrounded. And it's turned into a 2-3 year war. And he's still going on shows saying that like it's all coming crashing down. right? And then you had the
Yeah.
Kursk offensive, which none of them predicted. So he's a disinfo artist, and he's very typical of these kind of ex-U.S. government employees who they have a grudge against their former employer for whatever reason, like he wasn't promoted or whatever, or he got fired, and then they flip and they essentially become mouthpieces for whoever they think is on the other side of this geopolitical shit.
Yeah. Interesting. Oh my God, what about this guy? This guy is surely an expert in geopolitics who is respected worldwide for his efforts as a UN weapons inspector, right?
Well, in reality, he's a disgusting pedophile who was caught and arrested and convicted for being a filthy, deranged pedophile. He is a grifter. He's just like McGregor. He just gets up on the soapbox, spouts out a bunch of shit that he has no proof of, and then people believe him because he's got these credentials. And all he does is he's like good at talking about like all this mumbo jumbo about weapon systems and stuff, and that's why people think he's like a great expert, because he's like,
I know about this weapon system and these rockets and this kind of these missiles. They can't even reach here. And
so he's always doing that bit, right? And people think he's a credible commentator, but everything he said, like McGregor, has been wrong about the war. And now he's probably going to run to Russia and hide out there.
Yeah. Let's move on. I'm not sure who this guy is. Number 8, Phil Giraldi, former CIA officer, but tell us about this guy.
Yeah, he's similar to McGregor. He worked for the CIA, and he would get on Russia Today a lot. So basically, this guy's bit is like criticizing the Israeli lobby. And it's similar to Mersheimer, right? He'll critique the Israeli lobby, but he will never criticize Russia. And so you notice there's been a payoff there. These guys are on the outs with the U.S. government, and so they're looking for a sugar daddy to platform them. And here comes Russia Today, who will platform any critique of the West. And so this is what he's taking advantage of. He actually said, there's a good Johnny Gat video exposing this guy where he correctly said that like the Israeli lobby should be registered as a foreign agent. I mean, I would go even further. I'd say to just get rid of him entirely. But then he was complaining when the West was shutting down Russia Today and trying to get them to register as a foreign agent. So you see his double standard, right? He doesn't want Russia to register as a foreign agent because this asshole's being paid by our team.
There it is. Yeah, there it is. All right, next on the list is leader of the white race himself, our friend, champion of white interest, Nick Fuentes. This is a big one. Surely this guy is on our side, right?
There was some time around 2020 when Trump lost the election that this guy just went completely nuts. And he adopted, what's interesting, he adopted all of the takes that he was criticizing before, because he used to critique the Wignats for their Russophilia and their like glorification.
He did, you're right, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, like the Iranian stuff and the Assad shit and all that. That Wignats are all in on that shit. And he would criticize them. You're like, you guys are gay. This is gay lord shit. Why are you simping for like third world regimes and stuff? And then in 2020, he completely reversed himself and he started doing the same exact bit. And he started shilling China, shilling the Russians, shilling the Taliban. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's a form of nihilism. He says like, oh, he said in one stream, he's like, oh, wouldn't it be good if these regimes could start funding us and give us some free speech platforms and stuff and have a Eurasian coalition? So it's just like his contrarianism to the U.S. government led him into this Russophile position. He rapidly came out for Russia during the war, shilled for them, went on various streams, just, trying to justify violence against the Ukrainians. I mean, just despicable shit.
Yeah, interestingly, we mentioned, I forgot his name. What's it? Who's having a psychotic meltdown on Twitter at the moment about Keith Woods? What's his name?
Striker.
Stryker. Interestingly, some of what Stryker said, there's an element of truth in that Nick, at the start, was anti-Wignat, and then at some point he changed on that too.
Yeah, he became the Wignat that he was critiquing.
Yeah, fascinating, really. Yeah.
And now it's just like, just total Jerry Springer shit, you know?
Yeah.
It's just all about the clickbait.
Well, what about Syrian Girl? Surely she is a freedom fighter for Western values. I mean, we can surely she is a an anti-Zionist freedom fighter that we can like have as an ally. Surely,
Syrian hoe, that's what I call her. Yeah.
all right.
It's funny because she actually threatened to sue me once because I wrote some satirical article where I was just like making fun of her, and she's like, "I'm gonna sue you, boy."
Well, I'm glad
then
I'm defending all these people. By the way, I'm presenting the positive case, and Martinez is knocking them down.
Right. So yeah, she's just she's definitely not on our side in any way. She's completely hostile to the West in general. She's pretty much a Duginist. She went and interviewed Dugin in Russia. She went to Russia to I don't know, probably get paid doing some stuff with them Russian politicians over there, but who knows how she makes her living. But partially she made her living by, you know, puckering the lips up online and getting these gay lords to send donos to her while she supported the Syrian government. And now that the Syrian government has collapsed, her whole fucking grift is pretty much over. So now she's flipped to just complaining about those rebels again. So she's back on the grift. Yeah, send the donuts. I'm gonna complain about the rebels for the next 10 years until Assad shows up again.
Yeah, donate to her PayPal. Get some more Botox.
Before we leave her, she fully supported Russia's invasion of Ukraine. She justified it. She condemned Ukraine. She said Ukraine took part in the war in Iraq, so they deserve it. So she's driven just by pure spite and hatred of the West. Yet she refuses to go live in Palestine or Syria or any of these countries.
Yeah, I saw she got fact checked on Twitter. She got community noted. She said she will never surrender or something. And the community notes just commented, Syrian girl currently lives in Australia.
Correct.
Well, what about this guy? Surely this guy is a freedom fighter and alternative media truth teller who has been seeing through the lies and the bullshit, exposing 9/11 and Zionism to, you know, the world.
Yeah, Rat Ryan Dawson is what I call him. Ryan the Rat. Yeah, this guy is just a complete shyster. Like his whole bit is just obsessing about Israel, right? It's like, oh well, he's been going off that Israel-Palestine shit forever, and I guess these guys got a big boost since October 7th, right? Their dono links are in bold now, right?
Yeah.
Right.
He's the most censored man on the internet, though, right?
Not at all. He's actually it came out that he's a paid Tate shill. Andrew Tate pays this guy to shill for him on the internet. Literally.
No way. Is that for real? Oh my god.
100%. He started to suck up to the Tates because he was trying to get in with Sneeko and Fresh and Fit and that little clique of grifters, and he managed to do it. He got on the Sneeko show, then he got on the Fresh and Fit show, and then he got on the Tate bandwagon. He's been shilling Tate, but this guy's just a one-trick pony, anti-Zionist. So everything he does and says is just through the lens of what's bad for Israel is what's good, and so that's why he supports Putin, because he thinks Putin's more favorable to the Muslims and the Pallies, right? So he's a fraud. He's not anti-war. He's one of the most rabid, war-hungry psychopaths who is calling for more bloodshed in Ukraine and is justifying every attack, every missile that flies into Ukraine. He's riding that missile into Ukraine to kill Ukrainian children because he's a psychopathic monster.
What about, surely this guy is the intellectual of the Orthodox Bros. He knows what's right. He is the best debater on the internet. He can just destroy anybody with truth, facts, and logic. Surely this guy's on our team.
Let me tell you about the trivium, Alex. Let me tell you about transcendental philosophy, Alex. Yeah, this guy's a dork. I've had some squabbles with him too. I mean, he was a big Dugan fan back in the day. A few years ago, he was shilling Dugan hard. He just jumped on. He converted to Orthodox Christianity, and then he started shilling the Russian Empire, right? And I pointed this out to people. It's like these Westerners who convert to a different religion. They adopt this like zeal to them. They become fanatics, and this guy is this is like the Christian version of the ISIS LARP is like whites converting to Islam, and they join these terror groups. And this is what these Ortho Bros are doing. They're converting to Russian Christianity, and then they're shilling for Russian Imperium and Russian Empire because they want to take over. And so even though Ukraine is mostly Christians themselves, right? Putin is not pro-Christian. He's pro-Orthodox Russian Church because it's a tool of the Russian government. The Russian Church is just like a faction of the KGB that spreads the Russian state's influence around the world. And so this is one of the issues Ukrainians have had, is that the Russian Church in Ukraine has acted as an arm of the Russian government for a long time. And so there was a split there. And then all these disinfo peddlers said they banned Christianity in Ukraine, which is insane. Of course they did not. Most Ukrainians are Christians. You can see Zelensky in Christian churches himself meeting with these priests. His wife is Christian. Zelensky's wife is literally Christian. They baptize their kids in a church, and they're trying to claim that it's banned. I mean, it's complete disinfo from Tucker Carlson in the crowd. And his guy peddles that shit too. But Putin himself has banned Catholic and Protestant churches in the territories in the East that they took over, and they kidnapped priests, and they've killed priests, and they've damaged churches, and their missiles have wrecked a lot of churches. So don't be fooled by this pro-Christian LARP that they're putting on. They're not pro-Christian. They're pro-Orthodox because it's a tool.
Yeah. Do you think that the Russian Orthodox Church in like America is like just an arm of the Russian state, working itself like, I don't know, a bit of a fifth column, whether it's intentional or not, to like get people sympathetic towards Russia, or is it just like they imbibe it naturally?
Well, I think it's definitely a tool of the state. I mean, you notice that the Russian Orthodox Church just
definitely got more popular, hasn't it? There's Andrew Wilson. Is he of the Russian Orthodox brand of the church and that? I see these Ortho Bros running around a lot more than I ever did before.
Maybe he's getting the same money that they're giving Tenet Media. They're just chucking the cash around to these influencers.
What about Brother Nathaniel Kappa? I've not seen him around in such a long time. So I laughed when I saw him on this list. Is he just like an eccentric guy? He was Jewish and rebelled and found a niche online doing these funny videos, or is there something more to him?
Well, I mean, he's almost come out and I think he's tried to embellish his own ties to Russia. Like he came out, he says he's a member of the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. Some people have questioned that and said he's lying about that, but he's claimed that he knows people in the Russian government and all this crap. I mean, he's one of the major Putin propagandists on the right, and he's been shilling that for years. For years, he was shilling that shit. I've called him out I'd love to debate this guy on Putin and just put these things to him directly. He refuses to debate me on this. And I went into one of his spaces recently and I questioned, I was like, you say you're so pro-Christian and all this shit, yet you support Putin killing Christians in Ukraine. And he instantly muted my mic and booted me out of the thing. The little bitch that he is, little bitch Kapner. He's not pro-Christian or pro-white. He supports killing the whitest Christian country in the world.
Yeah. Do you think it's a LARP or what? I mean, it is weird, his background, being a Jewish convert to Christianity, who basically makes a Christian look crazy.
I don't know. I mean, I think he believes it to some degree. Part of it is just a grift. I mean, making money off of it, right? He's making a living off of it. I saw he's recently on one of his streams, he's got like the Noticer t-shirt. He's like just making all this crap merch. What's funny about that is that he's pushed like the schizo version of the JQ, and like I've been critiquing these people recently. He's always trying to inject that angle into everything, and I've proven that has nothing to do with the war in Ukraine. There are Jews on both sides of the war. Jews have been conscripted into the Ukrainian army and the Russian army. Jews have died in the war. There's 1,200 Jewish soldiers that were involved in the war as soldiers. The chief rabbi of Russia came out against the war. So like these freaking retards who would just try to use this angle to explain complex geopolitical situations are morons. These are people from 4chan, right? They don't understand nuance. They don't understand motives. And this guy is always pushing that J angle, and yet he's Jewish himself, and many people use that against him. So he's trying to inculcate the very same mindset that people have to shit on him, right? Like he's an idiot.
Yep. Next up was surely Mark Collett. Surely out of everybody, Mark Collett here in the UK. He is obviously on our side. He's white nationalist. He's for us. He knows what's up, right? Surely he's not paid off.
Well, the thing is with all of these people is like all of these people can say some things that you agree with, obviously. Me and him probably have agreements on about 80% of topics. But this is the one topic that seems to be the most corrupting influence on the right. And a lot of these white nationalists have bought into the lie that Colette spreads and David Duke spreads as well, that Vladimir Putin is this base trad savior of white people and he's going to save the race. And it's all nonsense because, I've made a whole video about this. In Russia itself, they have tons of immigration coming from Central Asia. Putin is pro-Islam. He was just kissing the Quran over in Chechnya. And then they're just after a terrorist attack by Islamic ISIS scum that went and killed 100 Russians in that building. And he's still appeasing Islam. You got Tatarstan and Ingushetia and Dagestan. Islam's the fastest growing religion there. And Putin's coddling all of that stuff. And on top of that, Vladimir Putin and Lukashenko from Belarus have been orchestrating migrant invasions of Poland directly and Finland directly. They're shipping in migrants and sending them to the West. And none of these assholes call that out. And that proves to me that they're either paid not to call it out, or they're just so loyal to Putin ideologically that they're purposefully ignoring it because it doesn't fit the picture they want to push to their audiences to get them on side with this pro-Putin shit, right? And Colette's definitely one of the main ones that's been promoting this. I'm so pro-white, but I support Putin invading a white country and laying waste to it, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's somebody railing in chat. He's even just like DM'd me in one of the Telegram chats I'm in. He's like, this guy's giving this guy a softball interview who's basically a Ukraine propagandist. And here he is saying, go fight for Ukraine then. So what do you say to these people who are like,
Go fight for Palestine. I mean, I'm sure John loves Palestine, right? You really love the Palestinians, so none of you are going to fight for Palestine, right? I don't tell
Yeah.
people to go fight for Ukraine. I say the Ukrainians have a right to defend themselves. And you, the faggots like this, come on here and say they don't. They don't have a right to defend themselves. They should give in, give up, and lay down their arms. Okay, well, so when your country's invaded, I'm going to tell you to give up, right? I'm going to tell you to lay down your arms.
Yeah, for real. Next up, you just mentioned, surely David Duke has had decades in the business proving that he is, fighting for the interests of just, white people. That's what he cares about. Surely he's not been corrupted.
Well, David Duke, unfortunately, he's adopted this one. It's almost like a one-directional worldview, where he views everything through the lens of like Jews versus Gentiles, right? That's his worldview, and he can see no nuance in that worldview. He always frames everything back to that. So what he does is he looks at geopolitical conflicts and he tries to find Jews on either side of them, and like whichever side he thinks has more Jews than the other side, he will support the other side, right? And that's what he does with Russia, right? Because you can't really say that there's like no Jews who are influential in Russia, because there are. I mean, many of the oligarchs there are Jewish, but he will just ignore that because he hates specifically like the ones in the U.S. government more than he hates those ones over in Russia. And so he's going to like anything that the U.S. government is supporting, he's going to be against. Anything he thinks Jews support, he's going to be against. The dumbest thing about that worldview is you can find Jews on every side of every fucking issue. You can find tons of anti-Zionist Jews who vehemently and almost violently oppose Israel. They're leading boycotts against Israel. You got Jewish groups in America that are boycotting AIPAC and boycotting Israel directly. So does that mean you should love Israel, man? I mean, it's just such a stupid, silly worldview. It's reductionist, and this is how he applies it. And I've already explained why the Ukraine-Russia war has nothing to do with Jews, right? It was started by Vladimir Putin, who's not Jewish, and the reason he started the war had nothing to do with Israel, right? It had to do with him removing a roadblock, removing a government that he thinks is not pro-Russian enough, that was pulling Ukraine out of Russia's orbit. That has nothing to do with Israel or Palestine. Same with this Dawson shit. They just pull it all back to Israel. Palestine, nothing to do with that. And secondly, Vladimir Putin is now warming up to the enemies of Israel, right? Putin has said, like, he's defended Hamas almost, and Lavrov has even blamed Israel for that conflict there, and he's been deflecting. They're basically using the Israel-Palestine thing to deflect against their own atrocities in Ukraine. So Lavrov actually said this in an interview with Tucker Carlson. Carlson went over there, and Lavrov said, well, I don't know how many casualties there are in Ukraine, but I know that Israel's killed way more than we have. So it's just a great deflection tactic that Russia's using now. So they've warmed up to the Muslim side. So they're a bit friendlier to Hamas now. They're friendly with Iran, of course. And so Russia's pandering to Islam domestically with their Muslim population and abroad. And so they're having to adopt a more pro-Muslim, pro-Palestine stance. So again, the guy who launches the war is like warming up to the enemies of Israel, and David Duke is trying to say that this whole war is just about Jews and Israel. So why are they dying in the conflict then? Why are Jews dying in the Ukraine-Russia war themselves if it's all about them and they're running it on both sides? And on top of that, all the oligarchs in Ukraine are losing billions of dollars because of the war. Their businesses have been blown to smithereens by Russia's missiles. It doesn't benefit them. Many of the oligarchs in Russia are losing billions of dollars because of the sanctions. Most of them came out against the war themselves. Mikhail Friedman and Peter Avin and Roman Abramovich's daughter came out against the war. That rabbi came out against the war and he left the country. The only rabbi in Russia that's not against the war is Beryl Lazar. He's basically hasn't said anything because he's loyal to Putin. And so the fact is that Putin launched this war against the interests of the oligarchs in his own country, of course, against the interests of the ones in Ukraine who are losing all their shit. And he did it purely out of his own personal desire to expand Russia's influence and make Russia a large power again. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. When you put it like that, it's very interesting. I mean, the outcome of it is the complete opposite of that, though, isn't it? When you say, just before we move on, that someone I know described it as Putin shat the bed. He thought he was going to achieve all this, and it's done the exact opposite. It's emboldened NATO. It's got Western countries all rearming themselves, put 2 more countries into NATO. It's been a disaster for Russia as well as Ukraine, really.
Yes, it's been a disaster for everyone in the world. It's been a disaster for Western countries who now have hyperinflation or something approaching that because of all the disruption to the supply chains. It's a disaster for everyone. Nobody really benefited from this. And Putin's the cause of it. All of these excuses that they're coming up with and these deflections and these kook theories are bullshit. And all these alt media people are complicit with it. Like this raging scumbag traitor.
Well, let me set it up. Surely Jackson Hinkle is an organic, natural social media user who is just telling us the truth, the unvarnished truth, like John Vance was in chat, that you don't understand. You don't point out you're ignorant of Western corruption, and surely a guy like this, Jackson Hinkle, is pointing out that the problems are with the West.
We're ignorant of Western corruption. You obviously don't follow my Telegram, do you, big guy? You know, I'm talking about, like, I critique Western governments all the time.
You're just ignorant. Issues. You see, you're just ignorant, and let's leave it at that. You're ignorant of all the problems are with the West.
Well, this guy he's one of these people who thinks the grass is greener on the other side. Well, if it is, then you have an open ticket to move to Russia. They've put out the call for Western so-called conservatives to go live in Russia, and hardly anybody has taken them up on it because they know it's not great. They know it's a freaking frosty hellhole over there. Nobody wants to live there. And so my suggestion is, like, just go read my stuff. I'm not saying that Western governments are good or they're supporting these. I'm a nationalist conservative, and I want to change these governments too. But that doesn't mean that everything they've done with this war in Ukraine is wrong, right? Jackson Hinkle, yeah. This guy is like, if there is a guy who's just outright being paid by the Russians to put out bullshit, it's this guy, right? Like, this guy came out of nowhere. It was like some Bernie bro, weirdo environmentalist, and then he just adopted this like based MAGA communism LARP, and then he just rocketed up with like 2 million followers on X after the Palestine-Israel thing kicked off. He started chilling that. Yeah. And he gets invited to all these like Russian conferences. He's meeting with Russian politicians. Like, they plucked his ass out of nothing, and now he's like at the meetings with Lavrov and at the meetings with the foreign minister. And he's just a massive anti-Western communist scumbag who shills for any government that's on the other end of this. And him and his little shithead sidekick Haas, that guy's on record saying he wants America to die. He wants America to decline and to die and to be destroyed. And that's what they want. They exist to try to justify hatred towards the West using the fact that the government is corrupt. Which government isn't corrupt? Neanderthals, man. Look at these two dorks.
These are your trad saviors of the West, pushing Western values, right?
Truth about Russia. Both of these dickheads are on record before Putin invaded Ukraine saying he would not invade Ukraine. They were screeching that. And then as soon as he did, they flipped it and became pro-war shills for the invasion. They're rats. They're scum. They're terrorists. I have no idea how they can travel back and forth from Russia to America. These guys are on videos with AK-47s with the Russian army and people over there in Donbass, right? And then they somehow come back to America and can just continue streaming and stuff.
Yeah, crazy. And I think finally we have Mike Pinovich, Mike Enoch. Now, surely, out of everybody that we've seen so far, surely Mike Enoch, literal, from the old alt-right way up until now, has been a truth teller, anti-Zionist stalwart, figurehead of the alt-right. Surely we can trust Mike Enoch, right?
The next Führer of the white race. He's going to save us. Yeah, I mean, he's the Charles Bosman connection to him, right? That's the Russia connection to these guys.
Yeah.
So Charles Bosman was, he ran Russia Insider, and he sponsored all these guys, and he was running, he had the property where they had their meetings for that group, that party that they had that imploded.
Yeah, NJP.
Right, and they've always been doing. They do the David Duke bit, right? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So we love Russia and China because Putin doesn't like trannies. So because Putin doesn't like trannies, he gets to kill a bunch of conservative white Christians in Ukraine, and that's fantastic, right? So it's all, again, it's the David Duke mindset. It's Jews versus Gentiles. This is their worldview, when it has nothing to do with that in this conflict. Oh, Victoria Nuland, man, Victoria Nuland. She's not even in the government right now. Like, this is their worldview is this. I'll sum it up. They're anti-Jew before they're pro-white, right? So they just hate Jews more than they love white people. So if millions of white people die, they don't care. Like, they will support that if they think it's like against the interest of some Jew somewhere, right? If some Jew somewhere loses, it doesn't matter how many whites die, it's good, right? This is how they think, and it's completely nuts.
Yeah, it's interesting that the JQ, once you uncover that once you become red-pilled about this one particular thing, it colors your view of everything. I mean, way back in the day, I feel like I went down that road too, and it's like you can't look at anything except through that one lens.
Yeah, it clouds your judgment. It's like a drug, man. And I was on that same thing. I mean, I was like that too. I mean, probably a few years ago. But the Russia-Ukraine war, actually, that's where I had the epiphany that they're wrong about that. That they're just myopically looking at it through one lens of analysis, when it had very little to do with that in the case of this war. And I saw them using this Zelensky thing. Oh, Zelensky, like Colette was doing that, Duke was doing that, these guys are doing that. Oh, Zelensky's Jewish, so haha, yeah, they deserve to have their whole country blown to smithereens because there's a Jewish guy in the government. So by that stupid logic, every Western country would deserve to be blown up, right? It's insane. And on top of that, there's Jews in the Russian government. They just ignore that. So they're tactically using it. I remember those guys were actually praising Yevgeny Prigozhin running the Wagner mercenary group. They were saying he's a hero, he's a war hero, and he's a great military man.
And he's Jewish, right? Half Jewish.
This is a guy running a death squad that recruited cannibal murderers out of Russian prisons. Cannibals, literal cannibals. Yeah. Who went into Ukraine to cannibalize that nation, and then they went back to Russia, were released, and went on to commit rapes and murders inside Russia. That's how much Putin loves his people, is that he will use cannibals to terrorize the Ukrainians and his own people. So that's what they were praising. And then as soon as Prigozhin turned against Putin, then they flipped on him. And then they were bringing up, oh, he's a Jew, man. We knew all along he was a piece of crap. Right. That's why you were supporting him. Right? When he was doing what Putin wanted. So notice the incredible loyalty to Putin.
Yeah.
Whatever suits Putin, they will go with it. They'll promote it. But as soon as it doesn't suit Putin, they tactically whip out their little J card here, right?
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah.
And on top of that, one last point is that the 4chan retards have been trying to spin this idea that Zelensky is turning Ukraine into a new Jerusalem. It's a new Israel. That's the reason for the war. And their only evidence of this is a headline from an article where Zelensky said something about Ukraine being the big Israel. And if you actually read the article, if you have, like, if you're not an autist and you actually read past the headline, what he said there was that Israel and Ukraine were similar insofar as they had a security situation that was similar, and they had soldiers in the streets and stuff. And he was just comparing them being military states, right?
Yeah.
With conscription and so on. But he had said nothing about turning the country into a new Israel. What does that even mean? What are they going to deport 40 million Ukrainians? Just bring Jews in there, and there's Jews dying in the war itself. Really dumb meme shit, and this is what they've been pushing all over the internet.
Yeah, wild. I think I added one more just to this thing that you didn't have on. I mean, this is by no means complete, everyone. And when, by the way, when it says Kremlin up there, I don't think Martinez believes that every single one of these people is paid for by the Kremlin. It's just like a rundown of, you know, people who have, for whatever reason, various influencers, for whatever reason, are pro-Russian, you know, maybe like blindly pro-Russian. It's a very interesting thing. So I added not that one, this. The Duran. I know. What do you think about the Duran?
Those are clowns. I mean, these guys are like outright ops for the Russian state media and stuff. They've worked for RT, or they've been on RT a lot. That Mercouris guy is like he's like a fraudster. Like, he was disbarred. He was like a lawyer, and they disbarred him for being a fraud. So these guys are real shady characters. It seems like to me, man, I don't know if you're noticing it, but all these criminals in the West seem to be jumping on the Russia train. So, like, if you're in legal trouble in the West, it seems like this Russia thing seems like a nice bet for you.
Yeah,
right? So, like, Scott Ritter, pedophile. There was another actual pedophile. I forget his name. I'll send it to you. An American pedophile went and joined the Russian army because he was fleeing prosecution in America.
Oh my
and
God.
the Russians were hailing him as a great hero.
Wow, I've just received a very generous super chat from John 2029. That is so incredibly generous. Thank you so much, John. He says, SJJMAS, Merry Christmas, and Happy New Year to you and the chat. Chin up, everyone, and keep marching forward. I don't know what to say. I'm blown away when somebody sends me some money. You don't have to do that. I don't ask for super chats, and it's incredible that you would send them. Thank you so much, John.
Yeah, get a nice steak dinner out of that.
Yeah. Before we finish, have you seen the origin story of the Duran? Because I actually have it on my Rolodex of videos. It's one I played before, and everybody's people can't believe it when I show it.
Was that Nima Parvini on there?
Yeah, that's Nima. That's Academic Agent. But
Yeah,
let me just see if
he's a Russo shill too.
Well, yes, I guess so.
They all get on that.
The clip. I'll just try and play this clip where they tell you their origin story. It's about 30 seconds long if it's the right clip.
From Ryan, how'd you guys meet and how'd the Duran come about? Found the channel through Viva. Thanks for the news every day.
Well, do you want to say that? Do you want to explain, Alex? I mean, we met in a park in Moscow. Let's put it like that. We met. We had a discussion. we discovered that we had a lot of things and opinions in common. We were primarily talking about Greece and the situation in Greece. And then events came about that we were contacted by a third party who was then trying to bring us together, and we did, and we ended up
Park in Moscow.
Park in Moscow.
See,
Exactly.
we were under the directions of Putin.
That's right. It was under directions of Putin. It was nothing like that.
So that's literally their origin story. I mean, how crazy is that?
Yeah, it sounds like they went back to the hotel and did something we all don't want to know about, right?
Yeah, for real.
Bunch of
And it was
sick
filmed.
freaks.
And it was filmed and showed to them on a videotape later.
All of these people, all of these scumbags that we're going through, like, these people present themselves as anti-war. We're the most anti-war people ever. Like Ryan Dawson, right? He's got his website. It's like antiwar.com. You know, Scott Horton and Scott Ritter. We're against wars. No, you fucking losers. You are for wars when it benefits the other side. And the same with John Mearsheimer. That little fucking guy, man. That sneaky guy. He
wasn't on the list. Mearsheimer.
He spurgs his ass off. So he always goes about realism. This is a guy who he failed to predict the war in Ukraine. He said at the very beginning, he says Russia won't invade Ukraine because there's too many costs. Because he's all about, the costs and the benefits, and states are rational actors, according to Mearsheimer. They're rational actors. And so he says Russia won't invade because it's a rational actor. Failed. They did invade. And then he started to justify the invasion by using Putin's talking points to justify it. He's on a video saying what Putin's doing is not imperialism, despite it being the textbook definition of imperialism. It's land acquisition, annexation of land. That is the definition of imperialism. And then he's on all these streams and all these shows trying to justify it with the NATO expansion argument. He actually wrote an article in the 90s where he said Ukraine should not give up their nuclear weapons because it could lead to Russian aggression. And he was right. The Ukrainians giving up their nukes made it vulnerable. That's the argument he laid forth. And now he's here in 2022 justifying Russia's invasion of Ukraine and advocating against Ukraine getting into NATO, which would be the only real roadblock to Russian aggression is Ukraine entry into NATO, which he's against. So somewhere along the line, he's gotten a payoff, most likely, or he's just ideologically blinkered and is so contrarian. And by the way, on the Israel-Palestine, you notice the stark difference in his takes. So when he's talking about Russia-Ukraine, he's always going on about big states and big rational actors in this shit. And he's justifying their power plays. But then when it comes to Israel and its conflicts with the Palestinians and the Lebanese Hezbollah and shit, he takes this other tone where he's like condemning them for being too aggressive and not following international norms and not following international law, which the Russians are not doing and have broken every fucking international law in the book. So notice what he's doing. He's on this BRICS team. He's on the BRICS team. So he's for Russia. He's for China. He's for that Muslim side, the Iranians. He's just a contrarian like the rest of these assholes. It's the same hypocrisies up and down, the same goddamn hypocrisies.
Yeah, absolutely. I know somebody who thinks he's the sensible man in, giving the sensible geopolitical takes. But when you put it like that, it is very interesting how he says, he doesn't adopt the same position towards big state Israel punishing little state Palestine. But he doesn't say Palestine should just roll over and take it, does he? Yeah.
Exactly, and that's proof they're co-opted. I put that to this Arab
really
Vatnik in a debate I had with this Arab anti-Zionist type. He was very typical, low IQ, and I cornered him on this point. Because he was going off about how Russia has red lines, and one of their red lines is this NATO and Ukraine thing, and so they're justified. You might want to respect red lines, he says. And he says, okay, by your same logic, Israel has red lines, and Israel's red line is Iranian nukes, and Israel's red line is Hezbollah on their border, and Israel's red line is Hamas in Gaza and their missiles. And so according to their logic, Israel is allowed to have all these red lines and to enforce the red lines on their neighbors because it's the big power in the region. It's the big, powerful, tough state that gets to bully everyone else. And then he just completely avoided that contradiction. He just dodged it because they know they have a double standard here, right? And no, I'm not pro-Israel. I'm just using this as a benchmark to judge the consistency of these rats who are using these arguments to justify this invasion of Ukraine, but would never use the same argument to justify Israeli expansion. So they're full of shit. You have to hold them to that point.
Yeah, wow. Well, dude, we said we'd do it an hour, and we've flown past 2 hours. So you've given us more than enough time. I think this has been a very exceptional stream. It's been fun. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I tell people where they can find you?
No, pretty much. Appreciate you having me on, man, and have a great Christmas and New Year to everyone else out there.
Yeah, well, look, I watch Martinez's streams on Rumble. This is where he streams. His Telegram is a cool Telegram channel. That's linked in the description. His Martinez Politics streams are on Rumble. You can catch them for free for your live before they go behind his paywall. I think that's how you do it, isn't it? I know I managed to catch them for free.
Yeah, you can watch them live, and then if you want to catch the replay, we have the members account.
Yeah, and then this is his website, which is also linked in the description, Martinez Politics. So there we go, everybody. Make sure you check out our guest. Very interesting guest. Thanks for coming. You made it to the first SJJMAS. And it's been fun. In about 1 hour, I have my final guest of the entire series coming up, so don't miss that. That's at 10 o'clock in about 50 minutes time. Thanks for coming, Brandon. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, man. Take care.
All right, Merry Christmas, everyone.